Hi everyone, I'm Noko O. Welcome back to my channel. This safety tips video provides modifications to the basic yoga postures so that you can have a safe practice. It's especially designed for anybody who's new to yoga or anyone who already has a basic practice and wants to move to a more intense class. Let's start with the wrist. This seems to be big concerns for people who are just starting yoga or who haven't taken yoga in a while. It can be very uncomfortable to have your all your weight bearing to your wrist. So I'm going to show you a few things that you can consider and try out. First of all, you want to spread your fingers wide apart whenever you do yoga. And make sure you have your entire hand flat on the mat. Avoid placing your hands right here. Okay, you want the heels of the hands down. If you put more weight into your fingertips by pressing them down, imagine you're almost lifting the heels of your hands so that you have less weight right here. So weight into the fingertips as much as possible. So that's the first thing. And then when you're at a point where you feel that you're reaching almost your limit, where your wrists are getting tired, you don't have to force it. Instead, you can get into your fist, making sure the thumbs are pointing straight front. The other option is to get into your forearms. And you can do this for any position that has the weight bearings onto the hands. So it can be either a tabletop or a plank. So I can be into my fist. Okay. Also, if you have the back tabletop right here, same thing. One exception is with the down facing dog. So in down facing dog, my shoulders are no longer over my wrist. They are behind my wrist. And therefore, if I was to place my fist down, they would create an angle that's very unsafe for the wrist. You don't want any weight bearing on your wrist unless all your limbs are stacked on top of each other. So when you are in down facing dog, the modification would be to get into your forearms, and this is called basically the dolphin. Moving on, elbows. You want to keep a micro bend in the elbows. You want to avoid locking your elbows or any joint. So locking means you push your joint all the way forward. It's very unhealthy for the joint. So you keep a bend. Looks like my elbows are extended, but I can feel a tiny bend into my elbows to protect my elbows. Same thing with the knees. Should always be a micro bend in your knees. So when you're standing, you don't want to press your knees back. Okay, keep a micro bend, legs straight, micro bend in your knees. The other thing with the knees, you always want to keep your knees stacked directly over your ankle or anywhere between the ankle and the top of the foot. So your knees should never pass your big toe. If I was to draw a line from my knee to the floor, this is beyond my big toe. When I'm doing this, basically I'm pulling on the ligaments that are connecting my joints together. Ligaments have the function to keep your joints stable. So whenever you overstretch them, they loosen up and they never come back to the normal length. Over time, they get too loose and your joint has no stability. That's why you can have injuries or pain and discomfort. So knee over the ankle. In order to do this, when you're in your runner's lunge, your foot has to be between your hands. I see a lot of this. Okay, the foot is behind, the knee is off the ground. So if this happens, just grab your ankle, place it right here. If your hands are not touching the floor, hands on the block, right there. The other thing with the knees, we also want to keep them aligned with the feet when we're standing or in a chair. Whatever space you have between your feet, if I have that much space between my feet, should have the same space between my knees. Sometimes I see this. So when you do this, you're straining the ligaments right here, or feet together. And It's easy to think about it when we are in a chair pose, but when we move up and down, sometimes we forget about it. So do it maybe with the eyes closed or facing a mirror. Still with the chair, same thing here. Sometimes I see the heels lifting, so the knees, if I draw a line, it falls beyond my big toe. So what I want to do is press the four corners of the feet into the floor, lifting the toes. This forces me to push my tailbone back and my knees back. And one more thing about the knees, if you're in a position where your knees are on the mat, you may even be sitting here, and you feel that the surface of the mat is too hard, or the surface of the floor is too hard on your knees, even with the mat, just have a little towel with you when you take yoga. And you can just leave it across your mat the whole time you take yoga. It doesn't bother you. You can go into your down facing dog, you can go into your runner's lunge, so you always have padding to protect your knees. Let's talk about the spine. So your spine has two natural curves, one in the low back, one in the neck. We want to maintain those natural curves as much as possible throughout our practice. Whenever you lean forward, there's going to be a natural slight rounding of the spine, or when we arch back, same thing, you're going to have a smooth arching of the spine. Try to maintain the natural curves as much as possible, especially in your forward fold. If I'm sitting down here and I'm noticing that my shoulders fall behind my hips, okay, my back is rounding, I no longer have the natural curves. So I can either place my hands here and push back so that my shoulders fall over my hips. The other option is to slightly bend the knees. And the third option is to use a strap. With your strap, we want to avoid leaning into it because again, I'm rounding my back and I'm not stretching my legs. So I want to lift, pull, and if I need to bend my knees initially, we can do that. And as you become more flexible, you may be able to extend your knees slightly or completely. It's very important that you take care of your back by providing support whenever needed. This goes for positions, for example, for your boat. So right here, that's your modified boat. If you feel any tightness, discomfort here, your abdominal muscles, your back muscles are not ready to support your legs, you can always place your hands. You can even place your forearms. And you could even place one foot down so you have enough support for your back. There's no point in trying to really hold it here when you're hurting your back. Okay, so again, hands or one foot here, or even forearms onto the mat. Same thing in standing position with your back. So if you get into a chair and right here you feel that it's straining your back, hands on the thighs. And then you can move on when your back's getting stronger, hands to heart center, and maybe one day with the arms fully extended. Leaning forward, fold, fold, keeping a micro bend in your knees, and having your hands supported onto something, anything except hanging in the air. When you allow your fingers, your hands to hang in the air, you're putting a lot of strain on your low back. So hands on the block, and again, feel free to bend your knees as much as needed so that your hands can reach the floor or the mat. And lastly, with the back, if you know you have any condition happening in your low back, or maybe your back is stiff or it just bothers you, be very careful with the twist. Twist or any movement with your hips are facing one direction and your hands turning to the side. So when you're on your knees or standing, you can only go so far. Chances are you will not hurt your back in that position. However, once we get onto the floor, into our back, and you have to twist here, pulling your knees to the chest and dropping the legs to the side. This is another twist. My shoulders are facing straight up and my hips facing sideways. So what you can do, you can always place a block wherever it's comfortable, underneath your knees, underneath and between your knees, or just between your knees. And you'll feel a big difference. So the twist should feel comfortable onto your back. If it feels like it's hurting your back, that's not an option you should use. Instead, you can just rest on your back, bending your knees, feet outside the mat, knees glued together. So there's no twist, just maintaining the neutral arch of your back. And I think that's almost it for the back. I mean, there could be a lot more things. Maybe just one more. Sometimes in yoga, you may do some ab work. You may have to lift your legs. This is when we start overarching the lower back. It's when you're going to strain your back. So instead, press your ribs, press your belly down. You maintain the neutral arch. You don't want to press your spine all flat onto the floor. Maintaining neutral arch. That's the most important thing. Whether you bring your shoulders up or your feet up. Okay? Belly in. And I'd like to address one more thing, just briefly going through it because there could be a whole new video about it. It's pregnancy. When you're pregnant, number one, you want to have the clearance from your doctor before you start yoga. Some doctors will advise you to do it. Some doctors will not advise you. Every pregnancy is different. If your doctor clears you for yoga, be aware that some doctors are not necessarily familiar with yoga. And I've seen all kinds of videos where people do things they're not supposed to do during pregnancy, even yoga videos for pregnancy. So things to avoid. Number one, obviously, you won't be able to arch your back that much. So anything where you lean back, okay, obviously you don't want to do it. Initially in your pregnancy, you may be able to do it, but you want to avoid. You want to avoid remaining on your back for a long period of time. So you can be on your back and then you can roll to your side whenever you have to rest and modify the position that way. And the most important, I would say, or the two most important one is twist. So you want to avoid the twist. Okay, whenever your hips facing front, shoulders side, you avoid all of those twists. And then the most, I would say, most important are the inversions. No inversions in yoga. Inversions, so down facing dog is an example of an inversion. Inversions are any positions where your head is lower than your hips. If you get into an inversion when you are pregnant, your baby may turn around and you may have a breech birth. Breech birth means that the feet come out first. That's not a good scenario. If we can avoid it, let's do that. So no inversions. Instead of your down facing dog, you can just get your knees down and stay right here on tabletop. And there are other exercises where you can strengthen your back while pregnant. They are safe for you. Same thing on your back. It's another inversion. Here, bridge. You don't want to do this again. Your shoulders, your head are lower than your hips. So instead, what you can do is a tabletop because your shoulders, hips, head are leveled. In any situation, if you don't remember what to do, you need to modify, you can always get into your child pose. Child pose, we have the big toes together, knees wide apart, pressing the hips down, and you can extend the arms. It's always an option you can take a break for a few breaths, and then join the class again. So that's it. This wraps up the safety tips for yoga. If you have more questions, if there's something specific you'd like me to show you, just please do leave me a message, a comment down below. I would really appreciate. Namaste.